The firefighter began telling his story. And Simon Cowell slowly stood up from the judge's desk, something he had never done for anyone in 20 years. America's Got Talent. The Dolby Theater in Los Angeles. Tuesday night auditions. The familiar rhythm of the show, singers warming up backstage, dancers stretching in the wings, magicians checking their props. Terry Crews working the crowd. The judges settling into their red chairs. Cameras positioned perfectly. Everything running like clockwork. Act number 47 walked onto the stage. He wasn't dressed like a typical contestant. No flashy costume. No sequins or leather jackets or carefully styled hair. He wore his firefighter's dress uniform, the formal navy blue with brass buttons gleaming under the stage lights, department patches on his shoulders, a row of service medals across his chest. His name was Captain James Rivera. 46 years old. Los Angeles County Fire Department. Station 23 in Pacoima. He walked to center stage with the posture of someone who'd run into burning buildings, who'd carry people to safety, who'd seen things most people only see in nightmares. But there was something else in his bearing, a weight that went beyond physical exhaustion. Terry Crews greeted him warmly. "Welcome to America's Got Talent. Tell us your name and what you'll be doing for us today." "My name is Captain James Rivera," he said, his voice steady but quiet. "I'm a firefighter with the LAFD. And I'm here to sing a song. But before I do, I need to tell you why I'm singing it." Simon leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, that familiar skeptical expression on his face. In 20 years of judging talent shows, he'd heard every story. Every tragic backstory. Every tear-jerking setup. He'd learned to listen with one ear while mentally preparing his critique. But something about the way Captain Rivera stood there. The medals on his chest catching the light, his hands clasped in front of him, his eyes scanning the judge's desk with an intensity that suggested this wasn't about winning a competition, made Simon pay attention. 15 years ago, Captain Rivera began. I responded to a house fire in Van Nuys. A single-family home. Neighbors called it in around 2 in the morning. By the time we got there, the place was fully involved. Flames through the roof. Heavy smoke. The kind of fire where you know someone's probably not making it out. The audience fell silent. This wasn't a typical AGT audition story. The family had made it out. Rivera continued. Mother, father, 2 kids standing on the lawn in their pajamas. But the father, his name was Marcus, he was screaming. His mother was still inside. 82 years old. She'd been sleeping in the back bedroom when the fire started. Simon's arms uncrossed slightly. Howie leaned forward. Heidi's smile had faded. Sophia's hand moved to cover her mouth. My captain told the family we'd do everything we could, but you know how these things go. The back of the house was an inferno. The roof was starting to collapse. It wasn't safe to go in. Rivera paused, his jaw clenching. Marcus grabbed my arm. He looked me in the eyes and he said, please. She raised me alone. She sang to me every night when I was a kid. She never missed a single one of my baseball games. Please don't let her die alone in there. Simon stopped the show. No one knew what was happening. The theater was completely silent. 3,000 people holding their breath. The cameras stayed locked on Rivera's face. I went in. Rivera said simply. Against protocol. Against orders. I went in through a side window. The heat was... I can't even describe it. The smoke was so thick I couldn't see 6 inches in front of my mask. But I crawled through that house searching for her. He stopped, composing himself. When he continued, his voice was rougher. I found her in the back bedroom. She was unconscious on the floor beside her bed. The smoke had gotten to her. I grabbed her and started pulling her toward the window. And as I was pulling her, she opened her eyes. Just for a second. She looked at me through my mask and she smiled. Like she knew someone had come for her. Tears were streaming down Heidi's face. Howie had his hand pressed against his forehead. Sophia was openly crying. Simon sat perfectly still, his expression unreadable. I got her to the window, Rivera continued. My crew pulled her out. We got her on oxygen, into the ambulance. She was alive. Barely, but alive. And before they closed the ambulance doors, Marcus ran up to me. His face was covered in soot and tears. He grabbed both my hands and he said, You saved my mother. How do I thank you for that? Rivera's voice cracked. I told him he didn't need to thank me. But he said, No, you don't understand. My mother's favorite thing in the world was music. She sang to me every night. Promise me something. Promise me that one day, you'll sing a song in her honor. Somewhere public. Somewhere people can hear it. So her love of music lives on. The audience gasped. Simon's hands, which had been resting on the desk, slowly moved to grip the edge. I promised him, Rivera said, looking directly at the judges. Standing there in my gear, covered in soot, exhausted, I looked Marcus in the eyes and I promised I would sing for his mother. I didn't know where. I didn't know when. But I promised. He paused, swallowing hard. Marcus's mother. Her name was Elena. She died 3 days later in the hospital. The smoke inhalation was too severe. She never woke up again. But for 3 days, Marcus sat beside her bed and he sang to her. All her favorite songs. The ones she used to sing to him. Subscribe and leave a comment, because the most powerful part of this performance is still ahead. At her funeral, Rivera continued, Marcus saw me in the crowd. I'd come to pay my respects in my dress uniform. He walked up to me and he said, You kept her alive long enough for me to say goodbye. You gave me 3 more days with my mother. And I'm holding you to your promise. One day, you're going to sing for her. Rivera's hands were shaking now. I'm not a singer. I'm a firefighter. I've never performed on a stage in my life. But for 15 years, I've carried that promise. I've thought about Elena. About Marcus. About the fact that I made a commitment to honor a woman who loved music more than anything, and I haven't fulfilled it. He looked at Simon, then at the other judges, then out at the audience. 6 months ago, my station responded to another house fire. Same neighborhood. Same kind of fire, middle of the night, family barely made it out. And when we pulled up, the man standing on the lawn was Marcus. 15 years later. Different house. But it was him. The audience made a collective sound, half gasp, half sob. The fire was in his kitchen this time, Rivera said. We got it out. Nobody was hurt. And when everything was done, when we were packing up our gear, Marcus walked up to me. He recognized me immediately. He said, Captain Rivera? 15 years. Have you kept your promise yet? Rivera's voice broke completely. I told him no. I told him I was sorry. That I'd been too scared. Too worried I wasn't good enough. And you know what he said? Rivera looked up at the lights, blinking back tears. He said, My mother wouldn't care if you sang perfectly. She'd care that you showed up. She'd care that you kept your word. Please, don't let another 15 years pass. The theater was completely silent except for the sound of people crying. Simon Cowell sat at the judge's desk, his hands gripping the edge, his expression showing something no one had seen in 2 decades of judging, complete emotional transparency. So I'm here, Rivera said, his voice steadying. I'm here to sing a song for Elena. To keep the promise I made 15 years ago to her son. I don't know if I'm any good. I don't know if I belong on this stage. But I know I made a promise to honor a woman who loved music, who raised a good man, who died too soon. And tonight I'm keeping that promise. He turned to signal the band. But before the music could start, something happened that stunned everyone in the theater. Simon Cowell stood up. Not the casual standing he sometimes did during a performance. This was deliberate. Ceremonial. He placed both hands on the desk, pushed his chair back, and rose to his feet. His eyes never left Rivera. Howie's jaw dropped. Heidi looked at Simon in confusion. Sophia whispered, "What's happening?" Backstage, producers were begging him to continue, but he didn't. The audience noticed immediately. A ripple of whispers spread through the theater. People started pulling out their phones. This wasn't normal. Simon Cowell didn't stand during auditions. He was famous for staying seated, for his crossed arms and critical stares. In 20 years of judging, through thousands of acts, he had never stood for someone before they performed. Terry Crews, standing stage left, looked between Simon and Rivera, unsure what to do. The control room was in chaos, producers frantically talking into headsets, directors trying to figure out what was happening, cameras scrambling to capture this unprecedented moment. Simon remained standing, his posture straight, his hands now at his sides. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't clapping. He was simply standing, a gesture of respect that needed no explanation. Rivera saw Simon standing and his composure finally broke. Tears streamed down his face, but he didn't wipe them away. He nodded once at Simon, a small acknowledgement between two men who understood that some moments transcended entertainment. "Captain Rivera," Simon said, his voice carrying across the theater. "Before you sing, I need to say something." The entire theater held its breath. "In 20 years of doing this job," Simon continued, his voice thick with emotion, "I have heard every story. I've heard about dreams and struggles and heartbreak. And I've become—" He paused, choosing his words carefully. "I've become cynical. I've learned to separate the performance from the story because my job is to judge talent, not emotion." He gestured to his chair, then back to Rivera. "But what you just told us isn't a story. It's not a strategy to win votes. It's a promise kept." And there is something profoundly moving about a man who spends 15 years carrying the weight of a commitment he made to a stranger in the worst moment of that stranger's life. Simon's voice cracked slightly. "I'm standing because before you sing a single note, you've already shown more character than most people I've ever met. You've shown what it means to honor someone. To keep your word when it would be easier to forget. To face your fear because you value integrity more than comfort." The audience erupted, not in applause yet, but in that collective sound of emotional release. People were sobbing openly. Terry Crews had tears running down his face. Howie covered his face with his hands. Heidi reached over and grabbed Sophia's hand. "So sing," Simon said quietly. "Sing for Elena. Sing for Marcus. Sing for every promise that's ever been kept. And know that before you even start, you have my respect." But what happened next, no one in the theater, or watching at home, could ever forget. The music began. A simple piano melody. Soft. Gentle. The kind of song a mother might sing to her child before bed. Captain Rivera lifted the microphone. His hand was shaking. His voice, when it came, wasn't technically perfect. It wavered slightly. It cracked on some of the higher notes. But it was honest. Pure. Filled with 15 years of carrying a promise and finally letting it go. He sang, "You Are My Sunshine." Elena's favorite song, the one Marcus remembered her singing most often. Simon remained standing through the entire performance. Arms at his sides. Head slightly bowed. A posture of reverence that everyone in the theater recognized as something sacred. When Rivera reached the final verse, "Please don't take my sunshine away," his voice broke completely. He couldn't finish the line. He just stood there, microphone at his side, tears streaming down his face, overwhelmed by 15 years of emotion finally released. The theater exploded. Every person stood. 3,000 people on their feet, applauding not for a performance, but for a promise kept. Simon walked onto the stage. He extended his hand to Rivera, and when the firefighter took it, Simon pulled him into an embrace. The tough judge who never showed weakness held a crying firefighter on live television and said 4 words everyone heard. "Elena would be proud." Then Simon walked to the golden buzzer and pressed it himself. Golden confetti fell over a man in a firefighter's uniform who had finally kept his word. Share and subscribe, so this story will never be forgotten. After the show, Marcus was brought backstage. He and Rivera embraced for a long time, either man able to speak. Simon stood nearby and watched, understanding that some moments don't need commentary. Today, at Station 23 in Pacoima, there's a photo on the wall. It shows Captain Rivera on the AGT stage, golden confetti falling around him, with a small plaque beneath. For Elena. Promise kept. And Simon Cowell, who built a career on harsh critiques, learned that sometimes the greatest talent is simply being a person who keeps their word.